Our next reader is the author of the novel The Last Good Chance and the best-selling book On Top of the World. His short story, The Women, may be read in the backstage section of NarrativeMagazine.com right now. Please, in some sense, give it up for Mr. Tom Barbash.
I think this is good. Can everybody hear me? Great. So I'm going to do, well, first of all, I want to thank Narrative for hosting this. And it's a really terrific magazine, and people should read it. And this is, I'm going to read something I never thought I'd do, but the beginning and the very end of the story that's in Narrative. And I'll try to fill in some parts in the middle. So it's called The Women. A week after my mother died, my father and I went to a series of holiday parties. We lived in a 16th floor apartment just off Central Park West, and in our building alone, there were 4 different gatherings at which you could see my father surrounded by an infield of swooning women. He had become, in the wake of my mother's death, desirable real estate, a handsome 58-year-old with money. He was testing the waters, and you could see it bringing him back to life. One of the women he met brought him to her gym and introduced him to her personal trainer. Another took him clothes shopping to stores like Kenneth Cole and Hugo Boss to raise his spirits. He returned home weirdly pleased with himself, as though he'd regained fluency in a language he hadn't studied since high school. I'd borrow a new leather jacket of my father's when I went out for the night, and I'd find business cards in the pockets or a napkin with a phone number. Before long, the women on those cards and napkins were dropping by our house, and I'd see them late nights drinking coffee in my mother's kitchen, moving in and out of the bathroom or my parents' bedroom, where they'd often stay over. I'd know because I'd see a scarf or purse left out on a chair. I'd hear them whispering as they snuck out for my sake at 7 a.m. My room was next to the front entryway, and I was having trouble staying asleep in those days. For the first few weeks of February, my father dated a chatty, frizzy-haired woman named Leanne who worked in the mayor's office scheduling press conferences and talking to reporters. They ordered in Chinese food, and they'd leave the half-finished containers lying out on the counter. They watched movies in his room, and then at some point his door would close. I pretended a few times that it was my mother in there, that she'd slipped in without my knowing, but usually I put my earbuds in to keep from hearing anything. One night toward the end of that month, he brought home a woman from Los Angeles named Chloe, who owned a string of boutiques and wore sparkly eyeliner, low-waist jeans, and a belly-button ring in winter. She flirted with me when he left the room, quizzing me about my personal life, and once touching my knee. She gave me her business card, which listed the address of her New York store. "Come by sometime," she said, with a predatory softness in her eyes. When my father walked back in, there was music I knew he hated booming from the study. "This okay?" he said. "Oh, Steve," the woman said to my father, "we can do better than that." She went and turned the tuner to some kind of lame diva dance music. She started grooving on her way back. She was about 40, I'd say, but she was tossing her hair and gyrating like an extra on a music video. My father glanced at me and raised his eyebrows. I wrote the word absurd on a piece of notepaper, and flashed it quickly so she wouldn't see. "Both of you come here and dance," she said from the dining room. She looked misplaced, vamping next to the long oak dining table and under my grandmother's crystal chandelier. My father moved his shoulders tentatively to the beat. Chloe yelled, "Show your father how to dance, Andy." "He does just fine for himself," I told her. I went and hid in my room. When I ventured out an hour later, his door was closed, and I saw her satin jacket and a shiny red purse draped over a reading chair in the living room. So I'm going to skip a little now. So the father goes and dates a lot more, and the son does not. And the father basically has adjusted to everything much better than the son. They both go to therapists. The father's having a really good friendship with his therapist. The son is not. And so his friend of the son's tries to fix him up with a very strange, odd girl who's not really his type, but who's heard about his mother and cries for him. And so he's not really looking forward to that. But they meet at a party, and somehow they're out together at night. So I'll read this part. We walked uptown along the park. I didn't know where we were headed, only that Sylvie appeared to have a plan. We sat on a bench on the path at 81st Street and sipped from a pint bottle of Knob Creek we bought at a corner liquor store. We made up stories about passers-by, giving them intricate reasons for being in the park at this hour. A young guy 2 or 3 years older than me hobbled across on crutches. "He's faking," Sylvie said. "Grab one of his crutches." "What would I do with just one?" "You could sell it back to him," she said, "or you could beat him with it." We traveled to the benches near the bandshell where Sylvie said she used to roller skate. I used to ride my skateboard over to watch people like her, I said. I was the one in the hot pants, she said. Really? I think I kissed you once. We were at the center of Central Park in the middle of the night. I thought, isn't this what crazy people do? Snow dropped down on us. My feet felt cold and wet, and I took another slug of whiskey. I was getting drunk. She rested her legs over mine, and I warmed them with my hands. It felt forced doing this, and then it didn't. As though she'd been working up to this question, she asked me, what's the weirdest thing you can do with your body? I don't understand, I said. I mean, can you do this? She touched her elbows together behind her head. Or this? She bent her hand back so that her fingertips touched the back of her forearm. No, I said, and nor would I want to. She looked so distraught that I went ahead and wiggled my left ear, something I hadn't done since grade school. I knew there was greatness in you, she said. Outside her apartment building, Sylvie declared, it's been a while since I've slept with anyone. I just smiled stupidly. You're quite adorable, she said. Her roommate was away for the weekend. It was a pretty standard grad school flat, 2 tiny bedrooms, a kitchenette, a narrow hallway, and a sunken living room decorated with a nice plush armchair and a couch that must have come from someone's family. We passed out in our clothes for an hour or two. Then we slept together with them off. Undressed, she was far sexier than her boyish clothes and awkward eagerness had forecast, and when she pulled me inside her, I felt irrationally as though I might have fallen in love. At around 4 a.m., I woke up startled and sweating from a nightmare. My mother wasn't in this one. My father had died, and I was sorting through his papers and clothes, and I was showing our apartment to a series of realtors. I asked them each, have you seen the view over Central Park? It took some effort to determine that my father was snoring in his bed a dozen blocks away, and my relief at this understanding was so intense I wept uncontrollably. In the morning, I was curious to find myself in a strange apartment and not in my childhood room. I heard car horns and voices outside, a doorman's whistle. I felt tired still, but in a different way, as though I'd been drugged. I noticed then what wasn't there, the buzzing. Oh, he's had this buzzing in his head. I stumbled over to the clock on her desk, 9:34. You can go if you want, she said from the bed. What do you mean? I mean, I sort of trapped you here last night. There was something fragile in her eyes I hadn't yet seen. I'd much rather stay, I said. She smiled and curled into her pillow. Her feet dangled from beneath the covers. I slipped back into bed and drew her to me so that her warm back rested against my chest. I closed my eyes, and in seconds I was out. I slept as I hadn't in years through that whole snowy day. When I woke again, it was night. I threw on my pants and padded down the hallway where I came across her reading a book on the living room sofa, legs curled beneath her. She glanced up at me. It stopped snowing, she said. Shall we go get a bite? Yes, I said. I grabbed the rest of my clothes from the bedroom. We bundled up and headed into the freezing night. On Broadway, I felt the wind rip through my peacoat all the way to my skin, and I was aware that I had left the first stage of my life and was out in the world in a way I was never before. So that's it.